Today we're going to be going over the Harper letter, but in particular, we're going to be going over Vaush's reaction to the Harper letter. And in the meantime, throughout it, I'll also give you my takeaways from the letter and how they differ from his takeaways and where they're similar. So let's get into it.
Our cultural institutions are facing a moment of trial. Powerful protests for racial and social justice are leading to overdue demands for police reform, along with wider calls for greater equality and inclusion across our society, not least in higher education, journalism, philanthropy, and the arts. But this needed reckoning has also intensified a new set of moral attitudes and political commitments that tend to weaken our norms of open debate and toleration of differences in favor of ideological conformity. So I'm going to take this step by step, okay? So first of all, let's take this sentence by sentence. Our cultural institutions are facing a moment of trial. True. Powerful protests. Equality. True, that is true. But this needed reckoning has also intensified a new set of moral attitudes and political commitments that tend to weaken our norms for open debate and toleration of differences in favor of ideological conformity. Yes. In times of great social strife, in times of discord, people tend to be much more strict on ideological purity because it's much more important to draw lines in the sand. That is generally how it works. That happened in the American Revolution. Hey, folks, before 1776 or whenever the fuck the actual fighting started, you could wiffle waffle on the whole, loyalist patriot thing, okay? After that, you could not wiffle waffle. Eventually, the lines are drawn. People have to...
No, here what he's saying is true. Eventually... Usually, when it gets to a point that we don't want it to get to, you have to choose a side. That's generally how it goes down throughout history. But we hope to not get to a point where people who are kind of fall in between the each extreme don't have to choose a side. We're hoping we don't get to that point. That's the point of this letter, to call out the call-out culture and the cancel culture and try to eradicate it, or at least lessen it, I should say, to a point so where we don't have to get to the situation where we're forced to choose sides, because that's an area, a red line that we don't want to cross.
Move into one camp or another. That just is how it is. And usually discourse does tend to suffer as a product of that. That is definitely true. As we applaud the first development, we also raise our voices against the second. This is an important sentence that we're going to be coming back to. So essentially, we're very happy that we're getting all this social progress, but we're not happy about this this weakening of the norms of open debate. I have criticized some of these intellectual tendencies as well myself. So, the forces of illiberalism are gaining strength throughout the world and have a powerful ally in Donald Trump, who represents a real threat to democracy. But resistance must not be allowed to hearken into its own brand of dogma or coercion, which right-wing demagogues are already exploiting. I'll get back to that one. The democratic inclusion we want can be achieved only if we speak out against the intolerant climate that is set in on all sides. So I disagree with the framing. I disagree strongly with the framing that this challenge to the norms of fair debate is coming in from both sides in any comparable degree. I will say this. Over the past decade or so, the left has probably gotten more tight-fisted. No, this was not by Chomsky. It's an open letter.
Over the past decade or so, the left has definitely taken this cancel culture further than the right. There's really, you'd have to be just an ideologue playing sides or ignorant to realize that, to think it's not that. The left has by far played up the cancel culture more than the right has over the last decade. There's been numerous incidents of this, so many incidents that I don't have the time to go through them all here. I will link a great article in The Atlantic that goes over recent ones that are just terrible, just awful for the people who got canceled. And these were people who aren't wealthy or well-to-do, aren't famous, so they're not going to be okay in the short term when they get canceled. It has like very strong ramifications on their life. But that's not to say that the right is completely innocent in this scenario, because they're not. I mean, they canceled Colin Kaepernick, or they tried to. It just so happens that he's a celebrity athlete, so he's still okay. Like, he's still going to be okay. But they tried their hardest to cancel him. They tried to cancel Mitt Romney too, the Trumpian right. They tried to cancel Mitt Romney when Romney came out against Trump in the impeachment trial. So I mean, they are not exempt from these cancellations that we see.
The left has probably gotten a little bit more tight-fisted and ideologically pure. The right was never interested in open debate. The history of this country has been one of progressives fighting against the illiberalism of the conservatives in this country. There are no conservatives who participate fairly in open debate, because if they did, they would not be conservatives.
I half agree there. So I do agree that for much of the history of this country, it's been progressives and liberals fighting against conservatives who stand to conserve the current zeitgeist. I do disagree on the part where he says conservatives don't engage in honest or fair debates, or they haven't recently. That's not accurate. That's not even true. I mean, this is what half of what he does is Vaush debates conservatives on YouTube. I mean, there are many people who do this, and there are lots of conservatives who do have open debates and discussions with people on the other side, and there are lots of liberals on the left who are on the other side of that debate arguing. Whether or not they do it fairly, that has nothing to do with whether or not you're right wing or left wing. There are people on the left, there are people on the right who don't debate fairly, and they do it in bad faith all the time. But there are definitely, without a shadow of a doubt, people on the right who are having open debates and discussions with people on the left.
That is how it works. That is how it has always worked. This myth that there are people who are reaching out from both sides to debate, and this is being pushed in from both sides as well, is not true. It is not. Conservatives are not interested in fair and open discourse. They are not interested in discussing these ideas, and they are and always have been the greatest impediments to fair, open, and reasonable debate in this country. And this is why I take issue with this, the idea that right-wing demagogues...
He's wrong there. He's wrong. There are conservatives who are interested in open discussions and open debates. It has little to do with whether or not they're fair in their debate or discussion with the fact that they are on the right, because I've had many bad faith arguments with people on the left as well.
Demagogues are exploiting this, we'll just say this cancel culture-esque attitude. I take great issue with this. Conservatives have been bitching that they are being censored and socially stamped on for all of history. This is not something contingent upon the presence of lefties looking to cancel. For as long as there have been conservatives in this country, there have been people screeching that everything that they know and love, American culture, white happiness, Western society, are being trampled by the likes of, in often case, student protesters. I firmly reject this idea that the behavior of people on the left allows the right to exploit the culture and the climate. They would be feeling persecuted no matter what.
I don't disagree that they would be feeling persecuted no matter what, but it allows demagogues on the right. It gives them ammunition. It gives them credible ammunition too, because some of these cancellations that you can read about are over such innocuous statements on Twitter, or in the workplace, or not even in the workplace, in like a supermarket or something. And it gives the right a lot of ammunition, and a lot of, like I said, credible ammunition that actually is true, and it plays well to people who may not actually be right-wing demagogues. They may not actually have an affinity for authoritarianism, but they hear these things from someone, from a real authoritarian on the right, or from a real demagogue on the right, and it plays with them. It's the whole thing when you're telling lies and you're spewing propaganda, but you smuggle a kernel of truth in there, and it resonates and works so much better. And that's what the cancel culture does for the right. When the left gets too overzealous with this cancel culture, it gives them that kernel of truth. It gives them that silver bullet that they slide into the chamber, and we don't want to give them that. Those of us on the left, like myself, we don't want them to have that ammunition. We don't want them to have that ace in the hole that they can play. And that's what is given to them by these crazy cancellations.
The free exchange of information and ideas, the lifeblood of a liberal society, is daily becoming more constricted. I'm not sure what we mean by that. The free exchange of information and ideas is becoming more constricted. In what sense? Like, Donald Trump has openly challenged, like, First Amendment rights many times over the course of his presidency. But what are we talking about here? Like, what, people are being mean on Twitter? What do we mean? Right now, we live in an era of unprecedented open speech on the internet. You could argue about a decade ago was maybe a little more open because website TOS policy was a lot more lax back then. But apart from that, I mean, yeah, like, for the most part, like, discourse is very, discourse, it's not a matter of discourse being free. It's that discourse isn't controlled or principled. Everyone's saying everything. I can go online and in seconds find a Holocaust denier or an anarchist. And, great, sure, fantastic. These opinions are out there. The issue is that this discourse is not taking place in an honest or constructive manner. But I don't know what this means exactly.
That, again, kind of half agree, because obviously, yeah, Donald Trump has, postured and mentioned many a times how to attack the First Amendment. Kind of agree with the Harper letter. So it's become constricted because there are a lot of people who just are afraid to say very, just again, innocuous things for fear of losing their job or losing friends or being ostracized from their, polite society. But in the same sense that Vaush is saying, it hasn't become constricted. It's actually become more open because of the internet and YouTube and Twitter, and everyone's got a microphone. Basically, everyone has a megaphone that they can spew their nonsense into at any moment of the day, and it could potentially reach millions of people. So in that regards, it's one of those kind of half-truths.
I've come to expect this on the radical right. Censoriousness is also spreading more widely in our culture. An intolerance of opposing views, a vogue for public shaming and ostracism, and the tendency to dissolve complex policy issues in a blinding moral certainty. This is true to an extent, and I appreciate the fact that they clarify that this is something the right has always done, but I would like specific examples because I don't like the idea of people just using this as a blind condemnation of what they call cancel culture. And we will get to that because one of the people who signed this open letter which began with a commitment to the principles of racial and social justice, was, I shit you not, J.K. Rowling. So, I wonder, speaking of right-wing demagogues exploiting left-leaning behavior.
No, I'm not going to comment on anything on the J.K. Rowling scenario just because I know nothing about it. I didn't follow it from the start, never have, never was interested in it. So I have no opinion on it.
More troubling still, institutional leaders, in a spirit of panicked damage control, are delivering hasty and disproportionate punishments instead of considered reforms. What does this mean? Editors are fired for running controversial pieces. I would need examples for this.
So that part means more troubling still, institutional leaders in a spirit of panic damage control are delivering hasty and disproportionate punishments instead of considered reforms. That means once a Twitter mob jumps on something, the person gets fired, just like that, with very little recourse, and regardless of what's in their past. So their past may show no other transgressions that line up with what happened that caused the internet dogpile, and all of a sudden they're gone. Again, I will link to an article in The Atlantic in the description of this video that illustrates just that. And that's what is meant. Instead of proposing reforms that are like, hey, listen, you still have your job, but maybe next time be a little careful, or, just do this or do that, instead of a swift down comes the guillotine and they're gone.
That literal one instance of that professor quoting Jordan Peterson, and then there was some public backlash, but that's it, and that's all that happened. This is very snowflakey.
Now, I don't know what that's in reference to. Vaush is right. The letter is kind of vague, but it's supposed to be vague. Again, like he said, if they wrote out every single instance of someone being canceled over something so minor, it would be, 100 pages long. So it is very vague there. But again, if professors are being investigated for quoting literature, that's insane. Guys, that's crazy. That needs to be called out and stopped.
And the heads of organizations are ousted for what are sometimes clumsy mistakes. This is not something new. This has always been the case. Whatever the arguments around each particular incident, the result has been to steadily narrow the boundaries of what can be said without the threat of reprisal. Is this true? I don't think this is true. I feel like people in power can say, fucking whatever, for the most part. I mean, and if that's not the case, then...
They can, for the most part. I mean, they can still be canceled, and we've seen that before, but they're going to be okay because, they have tons of money to begin with, and they probably have connections to other people who will get them a job somewhere else, so they're going to be okay. But we do have instances of, regular, just non-elites being canceled who have a much harder time clawing out of that pit that they've been canceled into.
In what ways are the range of acceptable speech being tightened? Is acceptable speech being tightened not a good thing when we're becoming more progressive? 100 years ago, you as a business person could be like, yes, I'd love to give you money, but I can't give you loan because you're a Negro and you're dumb because you're black. Sorry. And that would be acceptable discourse back then, for a variety of reasons. Now, you can't do that today. Is that not a good thing? Is that not perhaps a better... Have we not made a positive change? I would argue that in some instances, limiting the range of acceptable discourse is actually a good thing. Because, frankly, I don't want to live in a society, and I hope you guys would agree with me on this.
I agree, and I think the signatories on this letter agree. I think that there are certain areas, you want to keep out of polite society, for sure, 100%. But the argument is it's overstepping that. It's stamping out very minor, minuscule, innocuous transgressions or jokes even, or, off the cuff, just out of touch tweets. That's the argument. The argument is that there are, several professors who claim to be scared to speak honestly about certain topics for fear that they will be dogpiled and potentially fired. And that is the argument. It's not, that we should be against quelling some speech and ostracizing it from polite society. Of course we should. And we will continue to do that. But what they're saying is that the people who are making these decisions about what is acceptable in public discourse and in the public in general they're tightening the boundaries too much. They're being, dare I say it, soft snowflakes. They're being weak. That is the argument.
I want to live in a society where every time a person with incredible social power comes out as an open bigot, we all have to wring our hands and treat it like some sort of reasonable debate. Like if JonTron came out in that debate with Destiny to talk about all those white nationalist talking points, and instead of everyone doing what they did, which was say, holy shit, JonTron, what the fuck, they were all like, well, we should consider the extent to which Hispanics entering the gene pool would damage American society. Like, is that really what we want? We can debate these ideas if you want, but social condemnation for bigotry is, and as far as I'm concerned, generally a good thing.
I would agree.
We are already paying the price in greater risk aversion amongst writers, artists, and journalists who fear for their livelihoods if they depart from the consensus or even lack sufficient seal and agreement. You know who gets canceled and threatened with reprisal harder than anyone who criticizes Black Lives Matter? Any woman who ever posted anything about the problems in gaming culture during Gamergate. Holy fuck. That is the truest shit I've ever said in my life. I guess I'm just not seeing this that much. Maybe people are being a little more careful with their language, but I don't know if that's representative of some horrible threat to our discourse. Yeah, a lot of those writers during the Gamergate days were literally blacklisted because like the companies didn't want to take on the writings of people who were like toxins to the gaming community. That's true, but how does that relate to this? The point that I'm getting at is that this letter, this open letter, is basically like an argument that the left has gone too far with cancel culture. It dresses it up with fancier language, but that's essentially what's being said. And I take issue with the framing here. I take issue with the idea that these are necessarily representative of a bad direction our society has taken. I take issue with the idea that this is a severe problem, that this is something even worth wringing our hands over. And I take issue with the idea that this is behavior which is in any way specific to left-leaning people. I know that in this letter they say that this is...
Let's go through all his issues that he takes issue with. One, he talks about how he takes issue with how severe the problem is. I'm undecided on this. I kind of see both sides. It is an issue. It's not... The issue itself isn't that big of an issue. What the issue is what they explain in this letter. It's that you have Donald Trump, you have a president who got into office, and a big part of how he drummed up support for himself was he was politically incorrect. He went against the cancel culture. He went against the grain. And being that we know that there are instances of cancel cultures and people being canceled who otherwise shouldn't have for really silly things, that's the kernel of truth that he smuggled into his propaganda that actually worked with so many people and still works to this day. And that is the silver bullet we want, as on the left, we want to take away from them. We don't want them to have that because it works. It works, I think, is the actual severity of the issue. Not so much the fact that, Joe Schmo was canceled, or, Colin Kaepernick, or Al Franken or something like that. It's not so much the specific incidents themselves. It's what the ammunition and what it lends itself to be co-opted by real demagogues and real authoritarians on the right. I do agree with him. I do agree that taking issue with that it's strictly a left problem. It's not. Again, I mentioned Kaepernick was probably the biggest poster boy of cancellation. And you have Mitt Romney as well. Those were on the right. They tried to cancel them on the right. The left does it more often, I would say. They don't do it for any less silly reasons, though. The right does it for just as stupid reasons as the left does. The left probably does it a little more often. And then the other one that he takes issue with of the direction the society is going and whether it's a bad one or a good one. It's a bad one, again, because of what it lends itself to be co-opted by people on the right. if we can keep it in a certain boundary to where we only cancel people who really deserve to be canceled, then yeah, it's good, and this is what we should be doing, for sure, and it allows the people more power to have over canceling people who may have more power than them, like elites, for sure, 100%. But again, what it does, why it's a bad direction, is because it allows people on the right, like Donald Trump, and who knows who's going to come after him, to use these instances and show people who are susceptible to their propaganda, who lean more right, to pull them in, to tractor beam them in, and get them to support them, and they can find their way into the Oval Office. That is what we're trying to make sure doesn't happen. That's what we're trying to fight against.
The stifling atmosphere will ultimately harm the most vital causes of our time. The restriction of debate, whether by a repressive government or an intolerant society, this shit right here is what I mean. Holy fuck. The difference between a repressive government jailing people for saying certain things and a society being intolerant of certain ideas is night and day. It is night and day. To lump these two together is to put people who suffer cancel culture in the same ideological category as people who are jailed by like the Chinese government.
That I do agree with 110%. The difference between a repressive government and an intolerant society restricting speech and canceling people is night and day. The chasm between those two is large, for sure.
Invariably hurts those who lack power and makes everyone less capable of democratic participation. The way to defeat bad ideas is by exposure, argument, and persuasion, not by trying to silence them or wish them away. I don't know, nobody's talking about wishing them away. Nobody's talking about silencing either. Listen to how dishonest the language of this letter is. What do we mean by silence? What about challenging? How much of this has to do with silencing and how much of it has to do with challenging these ideas?
I mean, that's what cancel culture is, Vaush. Cancel culture is you're canceling them, you're silencing them into oblivion. And now it's harder to silence the people you're canceling who are elites and rich and wealthy. You can't really silence them. But again, there are many just regular average day people who have gotten caught up in this cancel culture thing who have been silenced. And that is what they're talking about there. 100%.
These things are so different. It's incredible to me. Also, the way to defeat bad ideas is exposure, argument, and persuasion? No, idiot. The way to defeat ideas is power. You seize control of institutions, you do everything within your legal and moral right to destroy the ability for them to disseminate their ideas, you excise them from society, you make intolerant their perspectives, and then you obfuscate any granules of truth they're able to get out. I'm sorry. Wait, hold on. I'm really, 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 really sorry. Remember how socialism was a dirty word in America for a century and still is? Did the American government do that by exposing, arguing with, and persuading people? Really, let's really think about this for a hot second, okay? How did that work out? Let's talk.
No, they didn't. They didn't. He's half right there. So you get power, and then you use that power to change institutions and mold young minds, and particularly through like education and through Hollywood and through, Sunday morning shows and through radio, entertainment. You use that stuff to change minds. And it takes generations usually. And then those people grow up and they think a certain way and they get into positions of power at newspapers and governments and, billion-dollar corporations, and they actually are running the show then, and it changes over time. The ideas of the day are accepted or not. So that it's half power, it's half using that power to persuade and argue with people who hold different views. So yeah, for sure. And then America definitely, didn't they used their power to stamp out communism, and for sure, but they also did what I was just mentioning before in terms of schooling and entertainment, and radio, and what is shown day in and day out to every young child all the way through their teenage years and early 20s, and it just continues as they grow, and those things mold the way they think.
Speaking of repressive governments, okay, let's talk about when they decided when the government was our society was anti-gay. I guess they did it by arguing with gay people, exposing society to pro-gay arguments, and then persuading people that being gay was bad. No, it's about fucking power, you stupid liberal dipshits. Now, the degree to which you feel morally comfortable exercising power over others with regards to limiting the range of free discourse is an entirely different conversation. But when you frame this discourse from the perspective of, well, this is such a Jordan Peters, the free marketplace of ideas is actually the most effective way to destroy it. No, it fucking isn't. I'm sorry, how did Nazi Germany obliterate like fucking 98% of acceptable civil discourse within their country? Oh, yeah, the SS would go to your house. Hello? Do we have any Jews in here? We are hosting a public debate to determine the worthwhileness of your humanity. You can come here at 4 p.m. or later at 6 p.m. We're having runoff round. What the fuck are you talking about? That wasn't...
Well, yeah, Vaush, we know that there are better ways to persuade and take control of the discourse and get you and disseminate your ideas and get them to be the winning ideas of the moment. For sure, we know there are more efficient ways to do it, and the Nazis are definitely one way that's more efficient. But we don't want to do that, and we don't want to get to that point.
It's in a great German accent, but was sind die Juden? Like, no, that's not how it works. It's not how power works. Okay. Oh, and for the record, too, the positions that I take issue with, the fascism, the reactionary politics, what have you, these positions are also not achieved through exposure, argument, and persuasion. All these fucking dumbfuck Sargon of Akkad fans or Stefan Molyneux fans, these people didn't get into what they did because they engaged with the discourse online and saw ideas battle against each other. They got into it because they watched a couple of SJW Wrecked compilations when they were 12 and ended up getting groomed by people deliberately trying to pull, like, young men into, like, a far-right, like, political scheme. It wasn't a product of them engaging with the marketplace of ideas. It was just a form of exploitation. God, this is such... Noam Chomsky, why did you read this? I know Noam Chomsky is a huge fucking pro-free speech Deuterino, and I respect that, but this is just patently wrong. This is aggressively liberal.
I find it funny that people on the far left, are just condemning Noam Chomsky for signing this. When I saw it on Twitter, someone tweeted it, when Noam Chomsky is telling you your left-wing activism has gone too far, that's like Snoop Dogg telling you to stop smoking weed. Put the blunt down. It's perfectly put. Even Noam understands what is going on. So here, this is good from Noam Chomsky. So apparently this kid on Twitter, this guy, he emailed Noam Chomsky about the letter and the blowback that they received from it. Curious on your take on the aftermath of the Harper's letter. I'm surprised at how much controversy seems to surround it. Did you expect that result? Noam's response: you're seeing half of it. The other half is a stream of letters from left academics and activists relating their experiences but not wanting to be identified because of the toxic culture. The nature and scale of the reaction reinforced the message of the letter. I mean, he's dead on accurate there. So we're only seeing half of the blowback. And then you have a whole other half of, I'm sure, who are reaching out to people like Noam and the other signatories on this letter, who they can't come out. They can't come out. They can't be identified because they're afraid of the toxic culture that the letter is calling out and telling us we need to stop. It's the irony is so thick you could cut it with a knife.
You need to give an example of a good idea making it through via power in order for this argument to work? Yeah, abolitionism. We wanted to get rid of slavery. They didn't. We marched in. We slaughtered them. We burnt them to the ground. We built them back up. And now people who claim that they're pro-slavery aren't even well, at least they used to be before the advent of fucking YouTube, aren't even treated with like the time of day. We don't entertain discourse on whether or not it's okay to enslave blacks anymore. And when people do say they think it's okay to enslave blacks, in most parts of this country, they are not given jobs, they are not taken seriously, they are not respected. Now, there are, in some parts of this country, people who entertain these ideas. But yeah, power is what wins arguments. Now, anyway. We refuse any false choice between justice and freedom. Again, I do not think freedom means freedom from criticism, which cannot exist without the other. As writers, we need a culture that leaves us room for experimentation, risk-taking, and even mistakes. Again, when writers get quote-unquote canceled, they don't do it because they take a risk and fuck up. They usually do it because they say something unfathomably stupid or bigoted and then quadruple down on it in Twitter, okay? I've seen a lot of journalists, like, fucking nosedive.
That's not entirely true, because there are writers and people who just make honest mistakes, or they are taking a risk and they're putting something out there and it's not received well by the general public, and they apologize, but no matter how sincere or to what height the apology reaches, it's not accepted. We've seen that time and time again. And that can't happen. That's not a healthy society. There has to be a point where we accept people back into society when they apologize, especially when we have no reason to believe that the apology isn't sincere.
The people who are on this list, a lot of them are right-leaning people, even though this letter is supposed to take place from the perspective.
Okay, so I don't know every name on this list, but I do know that there are quite a few names on this list who are not right-leaning, not in the slightest. Okay, so let's go through, see if we can find a few of them that are just far and away left liberals. We have John McWhorter, for one, 100%. See who else? Obviously, Noam Chomsky. Nicholas Christakis. Now, you'll have to forgive me. I'm sure there are more, but I don't know every single name on here. Sarah Hayter, Jonathan Haidt. So... Jeet here, Coleman Hughes. Let's go up this one here. Barry Weiss, Chloe Valdari, Salman Rushdie, Steven Pinker. So those are the ones that I know for sure are left, or on the left, or even decently far left, center left. For sure, 100%. Now, again, I'm sure there are more names as well. I just don't know them all. So, yeah, wrapping up my take alone on the Harper's letter. Again, they're pretty spot on in terms of not giving the right and real demagogues and real authoritarians the ammunition that they need to win votes, to win office. That's half of how we got Donald Trump, at least. The left has taken it a little too far. The right is not completely exempt. They have canceled people for sure, 100%. The right also co-ops the fact that the left does this and they use it to their advantage. We don't want them to do that. And for the most part, when elites or famous people get canceled, it's not a good look for the people who are doing the canceling sometimes, but we shouldn't really worry about that. They're going to be okay. Okay, they got plenty of money. They got plenty of connections. They're going to be fine. But there are other people who have fallen victim to being canceled who aren't in such positions of power, and we need to stop doing that. So, if you've made it this far, appreciate it. Like, comment, share, upvote, downvote. Thanks for watching.